One area where school leaders are particularly at risk for public scrutiny is in the quality of the instruction in their schools. Often in schools, you might have three or four great teachers, but you might also have two or three teachers who are new, who are just getting their sea legs going. And so the quality of education from classroom to classroom could shift. And this leaves school leaders up for scrutiny because if I was a parent of a student in a classroom where the teacher was not as strong as, say, the other classroom right next door where the teacher is sound in their pedagogy, I might have some issues with that. Not only that, but superintendents as well are really looking for their school leaders to have systems in place so that way instruction is consistently good no matter who the teacher is. And yes, many school leaders do walkthroughs. And yes, often leaders have checklists to ensure that students are engaged. But the question I would like to ask school leaders is, do they know if their students are just engaged, hands-on, minds-on, or both? Because we really want them to be engaged, minds-on. And we want our students being able to do the heavy cognitive lift. With that in mind, I was excited. Last week, I was able to go to Poster House in New York City and to see an exhibit on posters of the fascist Mussolini period in Italy. And as I was walking around, I was thinking, wow, with just my camera and a couple of photos of these posters, if I was still teaching, could bring this back to my students. Let me show you how I'm using my AI bot to help me with that process where I don't necessarily have to be the font of all knowledge when it comes to fascist Italy, for example. What I did is I put this one picture of a poster and I asked it to give me an activity where students could not only be analyzing the poster, but questioning it. So what you see here is the activity that it gave me is interview the poster activity. So step one is a silent observation that the student makes in terms of what they're seeing. And then students write 5 questions that they might want to ask the poster. Highly recommend you have a DOK question stems document right alongside your students so that they could be asking level 2 to 4 DOK level questions. You might also want to be providing some mini lessons on the side as students are doing that about the historical context of fascist Italy. And then you also might want to have students categorize their questions based on theme. Then you could have the students redesign the poster from the perspective of one of the stakeholders of the time period, anti-fascist, an American observer, or maybe even an African subject forced to live under Italian rule. That's one way you could use AI to increase the rigor of what you're asking students to do. I added 2 more images from that museum exhibit because I wanted to see if the AI would help me help students compare and contrast the images. It does do that. So here it is. You would have, here's the example or one example of an activity you could do. You want to question these posters in totality as to their purpose, their audience, their values, where the poster themes are similar and where they are different. Because as we know, similarities and differences is one of Marzano's 9 highly effective instructional strategies. So students, again, are going to create their questions. Then you set up the poster the way you want it to respond. Speak in first person, use specific historical references. You do want to build in that possibility for diversion. So how are these 3 posters, the aviation poster, the Duce Returns poster, and the Compashu advertisement, how are they maybe different from one another, but still exemplify the period of time these posters represent in Italian history? For example, students might ask, do you all serve the same purpose? And then the posters would be able to answer similarly or in a different fashion. After, you could have a discussion activity where students are debating these questions that you see here. You could even extend that to writing. So those are just some of the ways you could use the AI bot to actually interview one poster or interview several posters where, again, you're getting into convergent and divergent ideas and themes in those posters. Another thing I always like to do, and you see this more in the elementary level, but I think there's an opportunity to do this on the high school level, and that's stations rotation. Here, I asked the AI, not just drawing on those posters, but in looking at Italian fascism, what are some of the stations that students could be engaging in? And as you could see, it's definitely done that. It's given me my stations, economics under fascism, politics under fascism. It also gives me social and cultural issues under fascism, and then also a comparative in terms of what is fascism in general. I also had the chance to interview David Modigliani, who produced a podcast series on his own Italian Jewish family's history during that time period. So I asked it, could you help me create a reflection document that students could use and discuss amongst themselves based on the podcast? And so you see, it gave me that here. Again, that could be another station if you're teaching about the interwar year period and fascism. It even gives you higher level discussion questions that the students can be engaging in and scaffolds for students who are going to struggle with that. So, what can you do to help students still engage in that higher level thinking? Again, because we want to mitigate when we go into classrooms and see students who are engaged but hands on, not minds on. So those are some examples. There's one other one down here I want to show you, and that is you could actually create a choose your own adventure digitally for students to be working on. So let's say your students can't readily move around the classroom, it's really tight. You could be creating or putting these resources online or even training your own AI bot to give kids a choose your own adventure where they can explore any topic they want, but they can't leave the activity until they actually explore all topics. So you got the rise to power, how the corporate state supported Mussolini, and it also, this is where there are also some links, such as the Library of Congress, culture and youth in fascist Italy, empire and expansion. So you get the idea there that there are definitely a lot of ways you can use AI to analyze documents, to do simulations, to have interviews. Again, to make it engaging in a way that's forward thinking, because our children, our students are going to need to know how to utilize AI effectively and judiciously, but in a way that also allows them to grapple with these thoughts about history and political movements, some of which we still see present in our own day. I help leaders minimize their leadership risk by promoting instructional systems. So, if this was of interest to you and you have any other questions about how you might use AI to get students thinking more deeply, do put in the comments student thinking, and I'll send you some frameworks that I have and different activity ideas that you can use.